One goal, 25 handshakes, and 3 precious points for Norwich City after they continued what has been quite an astonishing run of championship form, even with a midweek defeat to Southampton thrown in there. This team under Philippe Clement just seems to find a way wherever they go. Welcome to the latest edition of the PinkUn.com Norwich City podcast, reflecting on what was a brilliant win for Norwich City in the capital against Charlton Athletic on Saturday afternoon. I'm your host, Connor Southwell, joined by Adam Harvey. No Paddy Davitt this week after what has been an intense schedule. We're managing his minutes heading into the international break, so he'll be fighting fit again for the Easter fixtures once we return. Adam, we've spoken so much, and you can throw stats at it and you can throw words at it to really kind of try and encapsulate the turnaround and the significance of what Philippe Clement has done since he's taken over as Norwich City's head coach. It's hard to, even with all of those, really sum up and get to the heart of what he has achieved, because sometimes you see with teams when they change manager or they've been in a bad run, it can be bad luck. You can have injuries, or you don't get the rub of the green, or there's a poor refereeing decision, or actually maybe your performances have been okay and you've just been a little bit unlucky. But actually, with Norwich, and we all saw it in those early weeks of the season, there was no luck about where they were in the league. They were the poorest, with the exception of obviously a very stricken Sheffield Wednesday team, the poorest team in the league. They were producing the poorest performances. They were producing the poorest results. The league table showed that. To be where they are today, which is 10th in the championship table, it's I keep finding myself using the word remarkable, but it really is astonishing what has been done here in such a short period of time to make this team look as transformed as they are.
Yeah, I'm running out of superlatives really to throw at Philippe Clement for the job he's done here. I think that was their 11th win yesterday of 2026. They only managed 12 over the course of the 2025 calendar year, which, you put that into context and the amount of turbulence that he had to deal with when he arrived at the football club. It was a club that was broken. It was on its knees. We saw the scenes post-game after the defeat to Leicester, and the anger, the frustration, the toxicity levels had reached an all-time high, really. Certainly in my lifetime supporting the football club, I don't really remember too much of that sort of nature outside the stadium, maybe sort of the relegations to League One. But I think there was a lot of kind of extra context to wrap around that in terms of the position of the football club at the time. And this was supposed to be different, this season. It was meant to be a top six tilt. Atanasio would obviously back them heavily in the summer, and I think there was expectation, there was hope, and that obviously quickly dwindled under Liam Bannon. The performances were poor, and 7 straight defeats at Carrow Road. That's sort of meant to be a happy haven, really, for the football club. They're supposed to get their results there, and they weren't managing to do that. And Clement's come in and just transformed them from top to bottom, really. There's players within this squad who were signed for big money and came in with expectation. You maybe look at someone like Pelle Mattsson yesterday and his performance level, and you contrast that to the early parts of the season where, I was probably his biggest supporter, and you could see technically he had the quality, but he wasn't able to demonstrate that consistently enough, or certainly, technically, show what he's capable of. And now you look across this team, and I don't really want to sell Norwich's players, but I look back in kind of August, and maybe barring Josh Sargent, I didn't really see anybody who in the future they could maybe extract a profit from. Now I look around that team and it's like, blimey, Cordoba, excellent performance yesterday. Feels like a player who's only trending upwards. Rory McConville, come in and been absolutely excellent. Callum Fisher has improved massively over the course of, this season. Pelle Mattsson, has been excellent. Ali Ahmed, an excellent sign in January, who now feels like he's already contributing, with goals and assists, and is only going to get better as time goes on. Paris Magoma, you look at the fee they paid for him and how much he's improved. And then you've got Makama and Torre, who are both, again, looked excellent under Clement. And I could keep going on, really, throughout the team, that there's so many players now who sort of you look at and you think, that they've got the potential now to be top-end championship players. And then maybe in the future, if they can sort of get to the Premier League and sort of prove themselves at that level, then with their development, then that's possible. So, it's remarkable, really, the job he's done here to get them in a position where they're now 10th in the table in the middle of March. And you go into these last 7 games with not a lot riding on them, probably looking at the table, but there is still optimism. There's hope. There's excitement around those games, which, go back to last season and Johannes off Torre, they probably, there was maybe a minor fear of sort of being pulled into a relegation battle, but they were in a similar position where I'll be honest, there wasn't really too much optimism heading into these last 7 games. It's almost like, can we just get the season done and head into the pre-season in the summer? So, yeah, a lot can change in a year.
Yeah, it certainly can. I think a lot in football, as is the same with politics, can change in a week very, very quickly. I think we've seen that, and it is yeah, just remarkable. All those runs of form, or yeah, those kind of stats around the form. Sorry, 10 wins in 13. They've only lost one of 8 away championship games on the road this season. Sorry, this calendar year. And obviously that came against Southampton. Oh, sorry, Southampton and Middlesbrough, the two. So two top 6 teams. It's really impressive what they are doing, and it's how they're playing as well, and the context of just how long that injury list is. I mean, you look at the team they went with at the Valley yesterday. Um, Liam Gibbs at right back, probably not even their third choice right back, really, is he? Callum Fisher at left back. They've got 4 left backs out injured at this moment in time. They've got kind of players sort of round pegs in square holes, or vice versa, square pegs in round holes, as the saying goes. There's a bit of fatigue, I think you can tell from our voice, but we're trying to keep the energy up. Without really a right winger, they haven't had one for a significant period of time. Matthias Christgoren, who hadn't started a game under Philippe Clement beyond that first one at Birmingham in the opener, having to have a prolonged run up front, and clearly isn't the sort of profile that that the Norwich boss would want from his number 9. All of those factors, and yet this team continues to look like a well-oiled machine. It continues to pick up results, and deservedly so as well, playing the type of football that we are seeing. And Charlton came into this form, and this game, and Philippe Clement spoke about it in his pre-match press conference in terms of they'd beaten Middlesbrough, they'd beaten Birmingham, they'd had 1 defeat in 6, they'd taken, I think, 7 points from possible 10 in their last 3 games. They'd had a whole week to prepare for the game. All of the odds were stacked in their favour, and yet Norwich City turn up and produce a really commanding, really dominant performance, Adam, where they've controlled a lot of the possession, they've created, for me, the better opportunities. But I think crucially, and this is probably the biggest point, they felt really comfortable. I know there was that flurry of chances in about a 3-minute spell in the second half, where Kovacevic has made an excellent save to deny Greg Doherty. Kane Ramsey's had a header that has thumped off the bar. Harry Clark then had the follow-up blocked. But beyond that flurry, really, of opportunities, Norwich didn't really allow anything. There was a Sonny Carey shot late on that was dragged wide, but I'm struggling to really think of too many clear opportunities that they conceded. I mean, throughout that 90 minutes, Vladan Kovacevic has made 2 saves, and one of those was from a flick on from a long throw. So it is the control that they show, the dominance that they show, and the fact that, yeah, they just continue to very efficiently, very quietly, with usually very minimal fuss, as they did against Preston last weekend, just go into games, find a way to score a goal or get their noses in front, and then seem to manage them so well.
Yeah, you sort of mentioned all the statistics there around their current form, and Nathan Jones, we know him well from sort of down the years in the Championship, and his teams are always difficult to break down. They're always going to be physical and give you a difficult afternoon, and that was definitely still the case yesterday. You looked at kind of the physical sort of presence of the two sides, and Charlton would win that battle every single day of the week, but Norwich managed to nullify most of that really over the course of the piece. And given that the Addicts were backed by a sort of relatively sold out home end, I think it was their sort of highest attendance of 2026. It could have been a very difficult afternoon, and probably in months or maybe years gone by, Norwich City probably would have crumbled in that sort of environment. Instead, that they really did nullify every sort of threat that Charlton did offer, which was pretty limited, let's be honest. As you sort of mentioned there, I think Kovacevic probably could have got a deck chair out and sat on it most of the afternoon in front of the goal, and would have had a sort of similar afternoon to what he actually had at the Valley. Apart from that sort of short spell in sort of midway through the second half, like you mentioned, where he was called into action on a couple of occasions, but it didn't really ever feel like Norwich were going to concede. And testament to the fact that was their 7th clean sheet now of 2026, and they just do look defensively much better structured under Clement. They don't concede the same levels of chances or big chances like they used to under Liam Manning. And that improvement really is kind of the foundation they need to build on now moving in towards next season. Because if you can keep it tight at the back, and then you still have that potent threat in the attacking areas, which they do manage to carve out opportunities and they do score goals, then that is ultimately the formula you need to try and get yourselves in and around the top 6. And I think that's quite an exciting kind of feeling, I guess, moving into sort of what's ahead. Because he has improved really every area of the pitch, and certainly that defensive side, because I think there was a lot of question mark probably over a lot of those individuals in the back line. But it feels like they've now sort of got a little bit more of a settled defence. Obviously, injuries haven't helped, and Liam Gibbs having to sort of operate as a right back yesterday is far from ideal, and that's something I think next season they need to address because, yeah, injuries obviously are part and parcel of the game, but also Norwich seem to have a very high number of them, and I think if they really do want to compete properly next season, then they can't afford to have the same level that they have over the course of probably 4 years now. But I'm excited really because it feels like Cordoba and McConville have got a very solid partnership. Kovakovic, I think, has certainly improved over the course of the season. It doesn't feel like there's quite so many sort of high level mistakes from him, and he is sort of the type of goalkeeper that will make big saves in big moments, but probably will cost you a few points at different times as well. And I'm not totally against that. I think he has that kind of character that you want from a goalkeeper. And then you've obviously got Fisher on one side who, it's kind of made that right back berth his own. And then, left back, maybe I'm intrigued to see whether they dip into the market in the summer for somebody there who could sort of, consistently play game in, game out, because that's probably been one of their real problem positions really over the course of this season. And that's no real fault of sort of those players. It's just been, injuries have disrupted that. So, over the piece though, I going to Charlton, back to the walls at different points and just grinding out a very hard fought and well-deserved 3 points is never easy, and Norwich managed to do that.
Yeah, I mean, we've done this in a recent podcast. Again, apologies for our audio listeners, but I've just flashed up a table there. That is the 2026 table, and just astonishing in terms of what Norwich City are doing at this moment in time. 15 played, 11 wins in that period. Not a single draw, by the way, and only 4 defeats. But actually, I would draw your eyes to the. Hang on, I'm going to have to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The 6th column there, which is essentially the goals conceded column. 10 goals conceded in 15 games from a Norwich City perspective. It's now 13 second halves that they haven't conceded in succession. And I think they're pretty close. So someone was telling me this morning to Manchester United's record, which I think is 14 or 15. We'll have to double check that, but they're getting very, very close to it, to a significant record there. And that goal difference as well, all positive. But crucially, look at that points total compared to the games that they've played. 15 played, 33. That is a points total over a pretty decent margin of games. We're not talking about 3 or 4 games and us maybe stretching the data and overhyping the data. This is now a really consistent run that Norwich City are producing, where they are averaging more than 2 points a game, and that, as we know in the Championship, is the recipe to get yourself over a 46 game season. And that's the crucial bit that Norwich City haven't been able to do, but that is what gets you in the places that matter come the end of the season. But it's an astonishing transformation. I think what's most interesting about it for me, Adam, is even though we talk about kind of the defensive improvement, I think often you can look at it and you can look at teams and you can say, well, they're really good defensively, but aren't they dull to watch? They don't really score many goals, and they're a bit of a set piece team, etc. That can be sometimes. And then the flip side of that, I remember last year when we were talking about all the goals that Norwich City scored under Johannes Torup, and they scored a lot and were very entertaining on the eye in doing that. But that came at the cost of their defensive record. What Clement and his team have managed to do so far this year, and of course, as ever with football, it's about doing it over a longer period and proving it again and again and again. But in this block of 15 games, they've got that balance absolutely spot on to take more points than anyone else in the Championship. And crucially, and Nathan Jones, who I think we're going to come back to probably later in this podcast, describing them, and he isn't the first to do it, Tom Directcart, as well, as one of the best teams in the league at the moment. And certainly, by the look of that league table, they've found a formula that is that equates to getting points, and lots of them in the Championship by winning games of football.
Yeah, Clement seems to have struck the balance nicely, really, between an attacking output that makes them dangerous, but also that defensive solidity. And as you said, it is the formula to success in the Championship. You can do what Johannes Torup tried to do, and it was a great watch at different times when they were thumping teams 4-0 at home, and you were like, blimey, this team has got some really attacking quality. But then at the other end of the pitch, that they were shipping goals, and ultimately, then it made those defeats feel a lot worse, where I think under Clement, they've only conceded more than 2 goals in a game twice. And that was kind of quite early on in his reign, of course, with the Birmingham defeat, and then the defeat at Vicarage Road, where they shipped 3. But yeah, over kind of the course of the season, with the backdrop of the amount of injuries as well he's had to deal with, he's kind of lost the spine of his team at different points. I mean, okay, consistently he's had Kovacevic in goal, and certainly McConville and Cordoba have been relatively available. But you look at someone like Pelle Mattsson yesterday, and what he offers you in that midfield, the control he gives you, and the quality he has as well. The fact that they missed him for 2 months, and you have Sam Field they sign in January, who hasn't played a lot of football for QPR this season, steps in, does an excellent job, alongside Kenny McLean. And I think if they can really kind of build that area of the team and have that consistent spine next season, then that sort of those numbers there, I think they can easily sort of replicate that over the course of the season, and ultimately that would be what would be required to get yourselves hopefully in and around the top six, but even maybe a top two push next season. So yeah, long may that continue. Really, I think I sort of done a little bit of digging for six things. At the moment, they're on track for only conceding 15 goals over 22 games. If they kind of continue on this current path that they're on, which is I think around about 0.67 goals per game, which is pretty remarkable in the Championship when you consider some of the difficult places you have to go and some of the teams you face, who all have different styles of play. And I think every manager in the Championship mentions it. You've got teams that will come and sort of press you high. You've got teams that will sit in deep and try and sort of flick on from set pieces, and that's kind of their way to try and find goals. And Charlton are a prime example of that. They went to Middlesbrough, and if you look at the stats, I think Middlesbrough had an XG of like 4, and Charlton was like 0.2 or something. It was pretty sort of drastic ends of the scale. But what they've done well is just defended well for 90 minutes, and then from a set piece managed to grab a goal. And then you've got other teams that will contrast that completely. So the fact that he's managed to ultimately nullify pretty much every single threat and every single team's individual style of play, is remarkable. I think it just echoes the sentiment for me that he is a manager who is above Championship level. Ultimately, he's a top elite European coach. That's why he's managed in sort of the Europa League and the Champions League, and he's managed in some big leagues across Europe. And hopefully Norwich City can hang on to him for next season and beyond, because I think it's going to be an exciting journey under him.
Yeah, agreed. And I mean, it's fascinating to kind of look at that league table when he came in, because we're talking here about a 15 game block since the start of 2026. Well, that's the amount of games that Norwich have played when he came in, and you look you look at that 15 game block, and it's 2 wins, 3 draws, 10 defeats, only 14 goals scored, 23 conceded. That is, I know we always go back to it, and people probably are getting maybe a little bit bored of continually going back, but I think it is worth a reminder. Only 9 points they took from that block. So 9 from 15 compared to what was it? What was it? Let me flash it up again. 33 from 15. That is quite the improvement in terms of what Norwich City are doing. And look, there's been lots of comparisons. I know our columnist Will Jennings wrote a piece about this, and it was a good piece as well about comparisons with Paul Lambert. That kind of feels like where people are going in terms of transformation and the level of impact that he had. Paul Lambert, of course, dragging a team, well, it was Norwich City at their lowest ebb in recent history, wasn't it, in League One, to obviously eventually taking them to the Premier League. Clement has done obviously not similar in terms of promotions and scales and whatnot, but in terms of taking a uh, what was perceived to be a really poor, maybe slightly uninterested, unfit, all of those kind of things that were labelled around Norwich at the time, to drag them. And as you say, suddenly players that 5, 6 months ago maybe we were looking at and saying, are they good enough? Are they sort of good enough for what Norwich need right now? Are they in the right context at Norwich in terms of players that are going to be able to compete at Championship level? And again, like I said, that stuff wasn't bad luck. I don't think any of that analysis was wrong. But I think it's crucially about what Philippe Clement has done and the impact that he's had to transform that. And what he is doing here, those kind of numbers, that kind of record, that's not normal in terms of when you overlay it with injuries. Contrast it with Stoke, for example. I saw Mark Robbins recently speaking about the sheer number of injuries that they have. You look at the way they've plummeted down the Championship table. Preston have had injuries. They've plummeted down the Championship table. There are other examples of teams as well. Norwich are kind of bucking the trend in that regard in terms of having all of these setbacks, all of these adversities. The fact that they went to Charlton on Saturday, just over 48 hours, 72 hours after playing at Southampton, and yet produced a very controlled, comfortable performance. That's not the norm. What they are producing, and I would maybe compare it a little bit to the impact that Frank Lampard had at Coventry last season. I don't think, sadly, I think Norwich are likely going to run out of road. It's probably improbable more than impossible mathematically. They're probably going to run out of the road to maybe replicate what he did in terms of getting them into the top six. But you actually look at the impact that they have had. They've sustained that run into the following season. Obviously, they've done very well this year and are on the cusp of the Premier League. That's the sort of thing that Norwich City, I think, will be hoping to replicate next season. But to go back to that Lambert comparison, and I was thinking about this a lot, and I wrote about it in the pointers yesterday, Adam, and you kind of think about the two teams, but I guess more so the two coaches. And the thing that strikes me is that belief that they've instilled into a group of players, and also the kind of way that that has been taken by fans. I think there is now a belief, probably tattooed on the hearts and the minds of this Norwich City squad. No matter where they go, no matter who they play, they're capable of winning. And slowly but surely, it feels like the fan base is beginning to embrace that as well. And I go back to this remarkable record. I mentioned this a few times that Philippe Clement has as a head coach generally, but also at Norwich of not losing games back to back. He's not done that so far in his Norwich tenure. They seem to respond to every. I know Philippe Clement maybe took exception with me saying it was a bounce back yesterday. I meant in terms of result rather than performance, but they never seem to kind of, certainly since November, that they haven't put a negative run of results together. They've always followed it up with a response of some description, whether it was a good performance or not before that. And that is a trait that Lambert team had as well. I looked yesterday; it took him until games 42 and 43 of his Norwich managerial career to do that, and that was spanning seasons. So it's Carlisle on the last day of the League One season, where I think probably the bulk of the squad had enjoyed the celebration, shall we say, and it was the start of the Championship season against Watford, and that was the first time that they did it. Well, for Clement, he didn't do it in the entirety of his Rangers career. If you kind of go through all the competitions in chronological order, you have to go back to the end of his Monaco spell. So there is clearly something, Adam, about the mentality that he instills into a group of players that makes them durable, but also cultivates a real winning spirit that we are seeing and we are speaking about in terms of, yeah, okay, we haven't got a right back, Liam Gibbs, in you go, and yet the system doesn't look overly affected. That is a real strong point of his management, I think.
Yeah, it feels like he's got sort of all the sort of jigsaw parts of a puzzle, and he manages every single week to find a way to kind of put it together so it works and it looks like it should do. Which, given that he's had a lot of those pieces missing, and sort of challenges as well. The adversity of someone like Josh Sargent and the saga that would have potentially damaged the mentality and the culture around the group, and obviously he even referenced someone like Eddie Marcondes, who it's pretty evident that he's not going to be here next season from his own quotes, and obviously Clement kind of backed that up in the pre-match press conference before this game. And a player who could easily, sort of, seep some negativity, I guess, into that dressing room, but he's found a way to kind of be such a good man manager that he's still managing to contribute positively. I think Marcondes even yesterday, he wasn't obviously involved, only on the bench, didn't come on, but still was celebrating with the fans in front of the sold out away end of the Valley. And I think you go back to the start of the season, and that wouldn't have happened. It was a group that probably didn't feel like they were gelled together. Now that really does firmly feel like that is the case. It almost felt like I felt at the start of the season that you kind of had almost groups within the squad. You had kind of the sort of Balkan lads that would maybe sit together. You'd have the young lads that would sit together. You'd have maybe a few of the sort of experienced senior pros that would sit together. Now it feels like they're kind of all collectively in it for each other, and they want to try and push this club forward and try and reach the Premier League, and I guess kind of achieve their own personal aims of playing against England's elite, really, some of the big boys in some of the big stadiums. And that's where Norwich have been down the years, and maybe failed to kind of build on that and sort of stabilize themselves as a Premier League club. But I think now there is probably that belief, certainly under Clement, and him as a coach, and the fact that he's managed in big games against big teams, that he could be the one to maybe buck that trend and get them there next season with a promotion, and then hopefully try and keep them there, because that's been the one sort of downfall they've had. And I think certainly now with the backing of Atonazio, it does feel like they're in a different stratosphere, really, in terms of what they could potentially spend as well, which is the sad sort of reality of modern football, that you probably do have to get to the Premier League and spend money to try and even have a hope in hell of staying there. You look at someone like Sunderland, who've had an excellent season, but they spent a heck of a lot of money to be able to do that. But it just is just a remarkable job that he's done, really. And the belief and the unity, you could see it again yesterday, with the celebrations post-match, which not really getting boring. You know, I think the fact that they just keep winning games, it could easily kind of lose the novelty value. But I think the feeling that on the pitch and certainly in the stands, yeah, it is one of unity and one that believes again in their football club and wants to go to every single game. You know, that the fact that they're selling out away-ins almost weekly now. You know, they took over 1,000 supporters to Southampton for a rearranged fixture on a Wednesday night. You know, that just wouldn't have been the case, I don't think, under Liam Manning, you know, back in August, September time, where, you know, I think most people were almost waiting for sort of the final whistle to leave the stadium if they hadn't already gone, because of the fact that they just had lost interest and they weren't interested in kind of being present in what felt like quite a toxic and angry place, where now it's one that everyone's happy, excited, and enjoying what they're seeing on the pitch. So yeah, long may that continue.
I was thinking, what could Norwich City fans do? What could they do to show their appreciation to Philippe Clement? Obviously, we've got the song there now that they've kind of readapted the Brian Gunn song, which is been nice to hear that revived in terms of his lack of hair. And I was kind of thinking, are you familiar with American? I don't know if he's a rapper, but American artist Pitbull. Are you aware of him?
I've heard of him. Yeah, I can't say
So
I'm too well versed. I guess it is in his music.
So I'll let you into a thing about me. I'm not a massive Pitbull fan, just to counteract that. But someone who is my 6-year-old son loves him. I don't know for what reason. I think there was a song maybe in a film that he liked, and he's taken him on from there. He dressed up as Pitbull at a fancy dress day recently, and basically part of what Pitbull does at his concerts. I don't know if he started this or if it's his kind of fans that started this, is whenever he performs. So say he was performing at the O2, for example, all of his fans would go dressed up as Pitbull. So they'd go and they would celebrate and enjoy the concert, all wearing kind of these bald caps that you can buy online. I reckon what needs to happen before the end of the season is Norwich fans, and look, there are several brilliant supporter organisations maybe who could sort this out. Is the Barclay and maybe the whole of Carrow Road, if they want to, bald caps on for a certain game. I think that would be a good way to recognise him. So yeah, I'll put that out there and leave it for someone else to run and take it on. But there you go. That would be a nice way. I think we do need to come up with probably Adam. This maybe one for another day. A bald Norwich City 11. I think so. If you It's tough because I think Alex Neil would have a shout in terms of being the manager, but I think we'd have to go with Clement at the moment. You can have Brian Gunn in goal, Temupuki up front. I'm trying to think of others. My mind, for some reason, has gone to Simon Charlton. There you go. There's an option at the back, and maybe we'll let other people fill those in. So yeah, if you can complete that Norwich City board 11, then put it in the comments down below. You can win a round of applause from us for doing that. But yeah, a couple of ideas there. You know us, as I think that last segment has shown, we like to ask the hard hitting questions, and we like to debate the hard talking, or sorry, the sort of hard debating points. We don't shirk anything that is tough. So let's do that now, Adam. I'm going to ask you a very tough question, which is, if you had to shake hands with a water bottle, how on earth would you go about doing it?
A good question, and one that I guess you'd have to ask Nathan Jones for the answer, because I can't say that anybody on the planet or anybody that I've come across certainly has ever thought to themselves, you know what, I'm going to go and shake that water bottle's hand, which, bear in mind, it's not got a hand, would be quite an achievement. So don't know the solution to that. Maybe someone in the comments can let us know. But yeah, I'd have to consult Nathan Jones in a sort of private room to ask him how that's possible.
This is, of course, if you were maybe under a rock after the game yesterday and you've missed Nathan Jones' post-match reaction on our channel, you can go and watch it. And I think for balance, I would say there is a lot of complimentary stuff about Norwich in there, as he was pre-game, to be fair. So I don't think it was completely covered in salt, but there was some aspects. He was very unhappy with some of the refereeing decisions. He felt his team should have had a penalty, and he seemed baffled by one offside call in particular. I can't remember exactly what it was, but where he said he presumed that the linesman had sun in their eyes in terms of missing it. So yeah, that was all interesting stuff. But the key line that really seemed to wind him up, although he said, "I don't want to make a big thing about it," and then seemingly made a big thing about it, was the fact that Philippe Clement was a little bit slow in coming in and shaking his hand after the game as he was celebrating with his staff. We've got some pictures, and maybe I'll flash one up while you're speaking, Adam. There was a sort of a big embrace among the Norwich City coaching team. There, Clement then embraced some of the backroom team, the legend that is Pete Dye, the kit man, and various other support staff who were there, some of the players. as well. And Nathan Jones, who was seemingly there long enough to count that Philippe Clement had shaken the hands of 25 people, in his words, didn't want to wait around sort of a few more seconds to actually shake hands with the Norwich City boss. And in the end, and I saw it play out, Nick Stanley kind of walked over and Clement was kind of looking for him, and Nick Stanley kind of pointed to where he was. Clement runs, he catches him up. Nathan Jones was clearly very unhappy with him on his way to remonstrate with the referees. They had some kind of back and forths in terms of verbals. And then the way it worked post match, I was doing the press conferences yesterday, and as is protocol generally for away games, Philippe Clement and the away manager does typically, not always, but typically does come in first. So Clement was first in. I asked him about it. He kind of played it down, and it was in many ways probably not frustrating, but it would have been interesting, I think, to hear his response to maybe what Nathan Jones had to say, because yeah, he felt the Norwich City boss showed, and I quote, a lack of respect towards him in terms of those actions. I mean, it's been a fantastic week, Adam, in terms of Norwich City seemingly living in the heads of their championship rivals. Southampton producing a social media video on or after Wednesday night that involved what they felt was some underhand tactics from Norwich City players during that game in terms of their physicality and their robustness in some of the challenges. Although if you look at the stats, I think the foul count was the same and whatnot in all of those. You know, he's somebody who has made a big play since he joined Norwich City about inviting managers in for drinks and having those conversations. That was the historic tradition that he first encountered in Scotland and has brought down here as well at Norwich. And I think he enjoys that as well. I mean, we've heard anecdotes of him going on coaches and looking for Frank Lampard after games and whatnot, because he likes that tradition so much and values it so much. So yeah, interesting. And I think if there's kind of one Norwich manager in recent times that we would associate most with respect and kind of values and this strong personality, is Philippe Clement. So I genuinely don't believe that there was any kind of intent there on his part. I think it was just, yeah, maybe he did get caught up in the moment a little bit too much, but could Nathan Jones have stood there for an extra 10 seconds and got a handshake? Yeah, I think he probably could have done, couldn't he?
Yeah, I mean, I saw someone make this point on social media that the sort of dugouts were almost in different postcodes. Which, to be fair,
Mm.
looking down at it, they were a long distance apart from each other. So I can sort of understand it from Clement's point of view. You know, just ground out a very good 1-0 win away from home, and yeah, they actually deserved it as well. Fully merited it based on the opportunities and the fact that they limited Charlton to very little. And I think he's entitled just to sort of embrace of his own coaching backroom coaching team. Given they've had a big week, they've had three difficult games, and they've had to have the midweek trip to Southampton as well, where Charlton have had a clean week as well, with no game in the middle of it. And Nathan Jones is hardly clear of emotions, I guess, on the side of the pitch. I've seen a few people sort of show the game, I think, in their playoff semi-final, where he was sort of on his knees, on his haunches, almost kind of, in front of the cameras celebrating, which I'd almost argue that that's a little bit more of a lack of respect, given that the game is still ongoing and there's still opportunities maybe for the opposition to try and get an equaliser in that moment. And the fact that Clement's not doing that, in sort of the 95th minute of the game at the Valley yesterday, I don't really quite see where he's got a leg to stand on when it comes to that. But for all the reasons you outlined there, Ria, if I kind of look down the years, I think pretty much every Norwich manager really has been very respectful when it comes to opposition head coaches. But I certainly would put Philippe Clement very high, if not top of that list, in terms of respect for all the reasons you outlined there. I think he is the sort of manager that would want to welcome, opposition coaches into kind of his office and sort of offer them a drink and kind of sit down and have a discussion. And yeah, I just don't really get the sense that he's the kind of manager that's going to try and throw it in your face or over celebrate or lack respect. So I did find that comment a little bit bizarre, to be honest. It's like, yeah, I'm pretty certain that Clement would have gone to a searched out for Jones to have certainly embraced him and shook hands come the end of the game, whether that had been the first person he went and saw or the 25th person. I still would have fully expected and saw Clement do that. So yeah, I guess maybe there is a tinge of extra emotion and salt thrown at it for those purposes. Yeah, Jones is a very emotional manager. We've seen that down the years, and some of his sort of clips, as I mentioned, sort of demonstrate that. But I think probably in the heat of the moment, post-match, his side had just lost a game where he felt there was refereeing decisions that went against them. I can understand why maybe he would sort of feel a little bit outraged, I guess, that Clement hasn't gone and acknowledged him straight away.
Yeah, I mean, the final anecdote I'll tell on this, and then we'll move on, because I don't want to dwell on it too much. To say that he was quite. I sat in the full press conference. He was complimentary about Norwich City on the whole, about their performance and about them as a club, and how Charlton wanted to replicate what they've done and all that stuff. So I think that is worth saying for balance as well. But there was quite a humorous moment. So for some reason, I don't know if this is something that Charlton do every week, and good on them if they do. But there were a load of kind of children at the back of the press conference room, and the way it worked was they actually asked a few questions to Philippe Clement. You could argue and debate if they were better than mine. That's fine. They probably were, and they also got a few to ball at Nathan Jones, and I don't think there was anything he wanted less in that moment than to have 4 or 5 questions from children. But look, fair play to him. He took them, he answered them, and he was very kind with his time to them. But yeah, that was, that was another humorous moment post game, as well, particularly the one that asked him what he thought of the refereeing decisions. To which he replied, "What do you think?" So that was particularly enjoyable. Let's move on then, because there are lots of individual performances that we want to get through. I think we should start with Liam Gibbs, Adam, because he's he's so interesting. I wrote about this again in my pointers yesterday. It feels like when Norwich City need a hole filling in their team, they turn to the adhesive that is Liam Gibbs, who seems to act as kind of their human polyfiller in terms of filling in a role. I made that his seventh start in a different position yesterday. So he's played right back, right wing, left wing, defensive midfield, attacking midfield, striker. I should have counted as I went along, but I'm pretty sure that's 7. It goes to show his versatility. And I think there is something in this because, of course, on the one hand, you can say, well, it's maybe hampered his development, the fact he hasn't had one position to nail down and to really call his own and to have a prolonged run into. But I think there's an argument that actually that has maybe prolonged his Norwich career. There's been injury issues in it. I think he's a good player technically and physically as well. I think in the pre-season pod, I said that he'd play as a right back at some stage. So I'll have to listen back to that, but I'm pretty sure that's something I said. So I kind of felt that this was maybe a role that would suit him because of the energy that he has and the technicality that he has. But I think for me, the fact that, and it's not just Philippe Clement, it's the other coaches that have gone before him as well. David Wagner played him quite famously or infamously as a striker. Johannes Torp played him in different positions. It was a long while ago now, it feels like, since that breakthrough season under Dean Smith, where he had a really good campaign as a defensive midfielder. But seemingly, he does have traits that head coaches like, and crucially, he garners their trust to deploy them in different positions, because it does feel like wherever you play him, look, it wasn't a perfect performance. There were rogue moments in there, but I think by and large, it was another sign of why he has earned that trust from various head coaches.
Yeah, versatility is definitely a key trait to have within football. You know, if you've got a few players within your group that are capable of covering off a few positions where, when needs must, an injury really do deplete your squad, they can step in and offer you a job in a certain position. Then, yeah, that's only a benefit really to the head coach. And I'm not saying that anybody would look at Liam Gibbs and automatically think he's a right back, but he does sort of offer you that sort of steadiness, I guess, in that position. He doesn't have, a huge amount of pace, but he has that energy and that drive to get up and down, which is something that you obviously need to be able to play fullback. I think, yeah, just generally, really, he is a positive individual, really, and what he gives you on the pitch is 100% effort, and he will, yeah, always go in with sort of the big challenges when required, and I like that from him. I think he's, maybe not technically the most gifted footballer in the world. I think he has got some good technical qualities, but he is just 100% hard work, and he's not afraid to get in and yeah, sort of get involved within a game. And for all those purposes, really, I think, yeah, yesterday was another positive showing from him in a position that's not natural for him. And really, I know Campbell got past him a couple of times with his pace, but over the piece, really, I think he dealt with most of what was thrown at him and nullified most of the threats. And of course, a lot of what Charlton offered yesterday was long throws and crosses and long balls into the box, which probably helped him, really, the fact that he didn't have to sort of come up against a side that maybe wanted to throw bodies forward and sort of maybe try and use those sort of wide areas more as an area to try and cut in and get shots away from. So I think overall it worked okay, really, and probably still a good thing that they've got, Jack Stacey and hopefully Ben Crossette back the other side of the break, because I don't think long term you really want to see him in that position. And given their issues in central midfield, I think he's probably better placed as an option there. But it would be very easy, really, given that probably in January, had there not been injuries around the squad, he would have been moved out on loan, and he could have really taken that personally and maybe sort of not down tools as such, but sort of felt a little bit hard done by, given sort of he's had to be at the football club for quite a long time now and never really been given a sort of firm role or his preferred role in the team, and that can maybe dent confidence, but it certainly hasn't for him. He's pretty much sort of starred, as you mentioned, in every single role now and done a fairly admirable job, I think in most of them. So yeah, I think hopefully sort of more long term that he can sort of find himself at home in a certain position if he's going to remain around the group for the future. But yeah, for the time being, he done well in the position he's had to play.
Yeah, and as you say, that does feel like, and you can never say anything, I think, with any sort of degree of certainty, given the season that has been in terms of injuries. But it does feel like Norwich City are going to have options back after this international break. Jack Stacey and Ben Crossette, who Philippe Clement said were both close to making that game yesterday, expected to be back. So that would at least give them one left back option, the glamour of one left back option, and two right back options to play with as well, which will be slightly better. So if this is to be just a one game cameo from Liam Gibbs, then yeah, I think he can hold his head up high at what he produced. Staying in the defence, Adam, I think we need to speak about Jose Cordoba, don't we? Who I thought was imperious yesterday, and it's not just yesterday; it's his recent performances and the way that he has played. I think again. You go back to pre-Clement Cordoba, and not even at the start of this season. I think in general, since he signed for the club, I think you could see the kind of profile and why Norwich City liked him and why they recruited him in terms of some of the quality that he has on the ball, the fact you can leave him in big spaces to defend, and he can cope with that pretty well. The ability that he gives them to play a slightly higher line because of that pace and that ability to recover. But he was slightly erratic. He had a mistake in him. There was maybe concentration points at different in different games that proved costly to them. And yet now there seems to be a consistency. We're seeing a lot more of the good stuff and considerably less of the kind of rough edges that I think he has. Feels like he's taken really significant steps forward since probably the start of this calendar year, I would say.
Yeah, I completely agree. I felt for me, he was my man of the match yesterday. I almost had to sort of check my sort of eyesight, I guess, in terms of the pitch. I thought he was a brick wall, to be honest, for everything he was thrown at him. Really, he sort of was there to block it. All the challenges he had to make against a very physical Charlton side. It's Lyndon Dykes is not going to give you a minute's rest. He's a big physical striker, experienced in the Championship. And then you've obviously got the kind of different offering in terms of Campbell, who's a lot more sort of nimble and pacey, and he dealt with both of them with absolute ease, really. And I sort of go back to when he signed, and I think Ben Napper was quite sort of complimentary and quite excited about his sort of signing, and looked at his stature and the ability he had on the ball, and felt that he had a ceiling which was above Championship level, and he could become and be a Premier League player in sort of the mid to longer term. And you sort of could see that, I think, in certain games last season, on the ball, very comfortable, made some sort of big challenges and big recoveries, but over the piece for the sort of reasons you outlined, there was so many mistakes within his game and a few sort of rickets that I think I sort of looked at and felt, yeah, that's not going to be enough to get you into the Premier League and make you a Premier League grade player. But he seems to have ironed those out over the course of this season, and certainly since Clement's come in, he's been a transformed man, really. And I think that partnership he's now got with McConville is helped. I think that's always something that managers will reference. And when you've got a sort of central defensive pair that are gelled and know each other's games and play alongside each other regularly, then that is kind of a key component, I guess, to success. And the fact that they've managed to keep both of those relatively fit, obviously both of them sort of had little spells out over the recent weeks, but generally speaking, that has been a fairly settled back two now for probably 3 months or so, and I think that helps it. And hopefully, of course, both of them will be around it next season. And I think another year of Championship football under their belt, and a number of games and difficult tests and different tests as well that they've had to face will only put them in better stead for what's to come next season. So yeah, I really like Cordoba, and I think he's a player who, if he can continue what he's doing at the moment over the course of next season, whether Norwich are in the Premier League the following year or not, I think he could be destined for top flight football.
Yeah, and he's a left-sided centre back as well, and we know how kind of short or how much teams are looking for them. If you can develop a good one, then you can see in terms of the money what they kind of get for you. If it does feel like now he's beginning to take real strides. I mean, how much of this do you think is helped by the fact that, and Clement has said this before, he wanted to bring him to Rangers. Norwich won that race for him. So he's clearly a player that Philippe Clement, and I'm sure he did lots of research into various players, but I'm sure when he looked at this Norwich City team, the fact that Jose Cordoba was here, that would have been really exciting for him. So do you think that's helped in terms of enabling Cordoba and Clement, I guess, in knowing, I guess, how to iron out some of those rough edges and some of that rawness that we saw in the early stage of his Norwich career?
Yeah, well, obviously we've never been privileged to be professional footballers. Maybe if injuries hadn't hampered our progress, we might have been. But I'd imagine when you've got a head coach come in who wanted you previously, that must instill confidence within you. You know, somebody like with anything really in any walk of life, if somebody wants you or backs you, then that does naturally give you that sort of added confidence, I guess. From a personal perspective. So the fact that he's got a head coach there that believes in him and wanted him, I think that could only help really. And clearly, Clement is a developer of individuals. He's proven that over every single club he's been at, really. He's sort of come in and maybe looked at players who were on the fringes or players that weren't performing to levels that they could potentially reach. And he's, managed to develop them to a point where they've either been sold on for big money or become a consistent performer within the team they're in. And Cordoba is definitely one of those because I sort of looked at the early parts of the season and it felt like Harry Darlan was pretty much a shoe-in for every single week in that centre-back role. And he obviously tinkered a little bit. We had Shane Duffy in there at different points. And obviously Jakob Medic was signed for a couple of £1 million and had a decent pedigree across kind of German football predominantly. And you sort of looked at Cordoba and he thought, well, I don't know. Well, is he going to get in ahead of some of these players? But he certainly made that position his own now. And yeah, he has become a sort of more rounded player, really. And a lot of those mistakes that have been eradicated. And that's only really positive, and I think that has contributed hugely to this defensive sort of stability that Norwich now have in terms of the fact that they don't really concede big opportunities, they don't really concede goals generally, and they have managed to keep 7 clean sheets over 2026 so far, and he's certainly a key contributor to that. So I think if they can keep him in and around the next season and keep him fit, then he is going to be a key player and probably one of the first names on the team sheet.
Yeah, and yeah, shout out to Rue McConville as well, which, as I said, we always ask the hard hitting questions on this podcast, as you guys know. Who would you rather fight least out of Cordoba and Rue McConville?
Wow. I think we're in McConville. Both of them are lovely blokes, by the way.
They
But
are,
having
yeah.
met McConville in person, I don't know if I could bring myself to fight him. To be honest, he's just a very humble, down to earth lad, and Cordoba is too. But for those reasons, I think I'd have to go with Cordoba.
I could see, particularly me, as I'm a very weak man, but generally, I think even a very strong man could make contact with Cordoba and just kind of bounce off him, considering some of what he faces in the championship. But yeah, that's a really exciting partnership, isn't it? That is blossoming and has been blossoming for a while. And like you say, as your mind begins to wander to next season, and you kind of try and map out maybe what the Norwich team could look like, I think it's very difficult to kind of see anything other than those two playing. And if that is the case, particularly with the defensive record that we spoke about earlier and the general trends, that's really exciting. And their ages as well. It was really, really exciting about what those two could be and could become over the course of a 46-game season, providing both of them stay fit. That's something that Cordoba in particular has struggled with, isn't it, during his time at Norwich? It's kind of felt like he's had a few good bursts and then there's an injury and that keeps him out for a while and whatnot. So that's what needs to happen over the break. Hopefully it will do, because I think they've got a nice balance as well. They complement each other really nicely. McConville just feels a little bit of a throwback, and I don't mean that as an insult. Like he's a player that wants to head, that wants to tackle, that wants to block, and just kind of really loves defending. And then I think but maybe he isn't. What I don't think he is kind of. I don't think he has Cordoba's kind of passing range or ability to step in and step up the pitch with real comfort. He can do it, and I'm not saying he's bad on the ball, but I think Cordoba's a bit more progressive in the way that he plays. Likewise, I think Cordoba's got more pace and probably covers in behind. But then I think some of McConville's aerial abilities and all of those aspects, I just think there's a really nice blend there of what Norwich City have got at the back, and that's exciting moving forward. and moving forward onto the pitch, Adam, it would be remiss of us not to speak about Pelle Mattsson, the first goal for Norwich City yesterday, and what a way to get it. I mean, you spoke to him after the game. I've interviewed him before. We speak about kind of humility and humble guys. Here's another one, as kind of the Scandinavians always are, and they don't tend to get too excited about anything. But yeah, what a player on a theme of kind of improvement. The improvement in him is unbelievable, really, compared to where he was at the start of the season. And seemingly all it took was Philippe Clement saying to him, "I want to see the player that we saw at Silkeborg that brought you to this club in the first place."
Yeah, it's sort of interesting really going back to last summer, and they obviously tracked him for quite a lot of that window, but they opted for Miko Topic originally, prior to Marcelino Nunez's departure, and he obviously went back in and signed him for what now looks like a very low fee, for a player who has a very high ceiling. They're still only 24 years of age, and he's just been probably one of, if not the most consistent performers now over kind of the Philippe Clement reign in that centre of the midfield. And they certainly miss him when he's not available. Sam Field definitely done a good job in terms of deputising, but I just think Matson gives you that little bit more. Clearly, there's areas of his game that he admitted this yesterday afternoon that he wants to contribute more in terms of goals and assists, and that's something that Clement has tasked all his players really across the whole of his squad to do more of, because you can't really be solely reliant on strikers, because when you have injury crisis, as Norwich have endured plenty of over the course of this season, and maybe some of your key strikers are out with injury, and other players have to step up and try and contribute. You do need to share the goals around, and that will hopefully be the first of many for him. It was an excellent strike, the position he managed to take up, the sort of touch he took before sort of whipping it into that far corner. It was a lovely moment for him personally, and I think he's someone who, if he continues on this current trajectory, will hopefully get national recognition, I think, over kind of the next upcoming months, because I sort of look at that Denmark squad and they've got some very talented players, and I think he could fit in, certainly in and amongst that, because he's got all the technical skill set that you require to play in that team. So just a really nice bloke as well, for, as you say, very humble, very grounded, and enjoying life as well at Norwich, which is great to see, because it can be difficult when you transition from playing elsewhere, and certainly for him, it's his first move away from Denmark, his home, and away from his family, and that can be difficult and can be challenging. There's been players down the years that have sort of made that step and have struggled, but he seems to have found himself a home here. I guess kind of the fact that maybe Silkeborg and Norwich, in terms of the relative size and probably kind of just the nature really of the places, are probably similar, helps. But I really like him. I've been quite a big fan of his over the course of the season, even maybe in sort of those early sort of games around sort of late September, October time, where maybe his performances were a little bit up and down. I felt there was a player there that was ready to explode, and he's done that now. And Clement, deserves again recognition and credit for managing to get him to the position he's in now, where he does feel like, again, one of the first names on the team sheet and such a key player in this system. And certainly next season, I think, again, got to keep him fit over the piece. And, it's a bit of an unlucky injury that he picked up with the ankle injury against Coventry. So I don't really think, you sort of look at him and think, okay, he's an injury sort of, injury, a player who's riddled with injuries. So I think next season, I'm again excited to see what levels he could reach, because I think there's more gears for him to go through, and hopefully that is adding more goals and assists we can.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because we've got to know Philippe Clement quite well over this period, as Norwich fans have, from kind of watching the press conferences and his media touch points that he conducts. He's very deliberate. He's very thoughtful in what he says, how he says it, how he delivers it, how it's perceived. And I guess you have to be, after spending the time that he did up in Scotland, where every word that you say kind of gets torn apart and analysed and micro-analysed and analysed again and taken in various different ways, as is the nature of the game up there. But I thought it was interesting a couple of weeks ago. I think it might have been after the Sheffield United game. You can probably correct me. He was asked about Matson. I think there was some Danish media that came over to speak to Pelle and ask Philippe Clement about him. And it was a really interesting answer in terms of, Norwich have to keep up with the rate of his development. And that is essentially saying that he really feels that Norwich have an asset on their hands. And the fact that Philippe Clement is so excited about him, I think, gives everyone reason to. And I think we've and you said it there, with absolutely good reason, because you look at kind of his game. There's not really a weakness that I see in terms of him as a midfielder. He covers a huge amount of ground. Maybe it is, like you say, adding a bit more from an attacking perspective as well. But in terms of his range of passing, the tough tackling, his pressing, his counter pressing, his positioning, all of that stuff is I think now at a level that is kind of top grade championship, and I suspect if you put him in a Premier League team or some Premier League teams, he wouldn't look out of place in those either. So that is, I think a mark of how much he has improved. And as Clement says, it's now about Norwich City matching his development, and hopefully he is one again that you see along with Kenny McLean. We spoke about that centre back partnership, but I think that central midfield partnership is really blossoming as well. It probably feels like it's around the edges that Norwich City need to add and raise that ceiling come the summer. Let's move on then, Adam, and look ahead to the international break as we sort of draw the show to a close, because it was really interesting speaking to Philippe Clement about this on Friday, and I kind of thought about it for a while. And the example I would give you is Ali Ahmed. I mean, it's quite frankly baffling, I think is maybe the politest word to use around it. You've got a situation there where Ali Ahmed is going to be in action for Canada. I'll get the game up now, but it's on in the early hours of Wednesday morning UK time. It is, yeah. So they play. Let me get the full schedule up here so I can see it and give you the right game. This also applies, of course, to Anis Ben Slimani. So they start their international break with a friendly in Toronto against Iceland on Saturday. That's a 6 o'clock kickoff our time, so it's not the worst one in the world. But then it's the second game I think that really highlights it. And again, this applies to Anis Ben Slimani as well, because on Wednesday, the 1st of April, and maybe maybe there is an April Fool's element to it. Norwich City will certainly be hoping that is the case. But Canada play Tunisia in Toronto, midnight, as I said, on the 1st of April. Norwich City then play Portsmouth at Carrow Road on Good Friday, which doesn't give those guys a huge amount of time to get back. It's a 3 o'clock kickoff, so it's not like a lunchtime game, and they're going to be really scratching around. But you've got to think in terms of them getting back into England. That's going to be Thursday morning. Norwich are then, you suspect, going to train in the afternoon of that Thursday, which will include kind of the tactical work. But you've got all of the issues in terms of jet lag and overcoming the time difference, and just the physical effects of being on a long haul flight for a period of time. Then 24 hours later, expecting both of those key players for Norwich City to play in a championship game. And again, given the context of where they are from an injury perspective, it's not like they've got loads of options to rotate either. So Philippe Clement struck quite a frustrated figure. And I think from that example, you can see why. Jose Cordoba's got to fly out to South Africa, excuse me, for 2 friendlies there. And of course, they're really crucial games because they're the final ones for a lot of these nations before the World Cup. I mean, it's so much around scheduling in football at the moment that leaves you scratching your head, but this one in particular feels completely bizarre.
Yeah, it does feel like the sort of health and welfare of players has been completely put out the window, really, when it comes to that sort of schedule that they're going to have to endure. And I sort of think to myself, almost it's a blessing that Norwich are at home on Good Friday, because they had to, say, make a really long away trip. Then these lads would be coming back in the building early hours of sort of Thursday morning. And then they're then going to have to get on a coach in sort of late afternoon going somewhere. It's sort of the only upside that they are at home on Good Friday. But that doesn't, negate, I guess, the fact that this is a shambolic kind of schedule that they're going to have to, make such a long journey. And again, you mentioned the time zones there, and then have to be available for this Norwich City team on Good Friday, where, thankfully, obviously, Norwich have managed to pull themselves into a position where they are very, very clear of the bottom 3. But heaven forbid they were still sort of in and around that bottom end of the table, and they really required these players who, have become key assets really in attacking areas, who are then going to be tired and fatigued and potentially at risk of picking up another injury because of the fact that their bodies are having to endure 2 back-to-back 90 minutes within 48 hours and a long trip on a plane for over 12 hours probably within that as well, which is, it just doesn't feel right. And I think Clement also referenced Motore, who, had he been fit and available, would have been flying to Australia for 2 friendlies, which we all know how far that is away from the UK, and I get it, and then the opportunity to represent your national team is a huge honour, and probably the biggest honour really for any player. And they all reference it whenever you speak to anybody in that dressing room. That the chance to pull on the shirt of your country, is massive. But when it comes at a cost of potentially picking up further injuries and sort of affecting the club that you play for and are contracted to, then I don't think it's right. And I think Clement was absolutely bang on with his answer, and it's as strong as really we've heard him on anything. He's certainly very clear and cut when it comes to sort of his thoughts on certain things, and the fact that he sort of almost offered that up without you really having to push him too much on it, I think was kind of him trying to send out a message a little bit to those sort of governing bodies that, look, this can't really be happening, and you need to maybe sort of look at this for future international windows. I know they change a little bit next season. I think we've got sort of a longer one in sort of late September, early October, and then there's maybe just a one in November and the one in March. But you look at kind of the shapes of the games. I know it's difficult because obviously you've got players within sort of the Canadian squad that will be playing in the MLS, and it's not really the same level of travel for them, of course. But yeah, I think it does have to be managed certainly between the nations and Norwich as to maybe whether these players, should be available to play for their national teams in these sort of windows where the sort of schedules are such a quick turnaround.
Yeah, and he said, didn't he, on Friday that he's kind of spoken to some of those international managers involved about, is there a solution in terms of managing minutes and whatnot, and maybe getting players away slightly earlier, and I think basically indicated that maybe some had been more receptive to that than others. We know Jesse March has spoken that they have a really strong relationship, so you would hope maybe that Ali Ahmed doesn't play the entirety of both of those games and then has to come back and play for Norwich on Good Friday. And look, I know there'll be people out there who maybe are getting their violin out and speaking about the amount of money these players earn, etc. But I think the human element of this, and it doesn't matter who you are or what profession you are. If we had to fly out to Canada and Toronto, and then we're expected to come back 48 hours and do a long shift at work or a physical shift or whatever, that would be difficult for anyone, irrespective of it. So there is a safety point to it, and Ali Ahmed as well has played a lot of minutes of Championship football in recent weeks, purely because Norwich have had very little options. So yeah, I think everyone from a yellow and green perspective will be hoping all of those players come back fit, healthy, and ready for the final throw of the season, which, Adam, is probably where we will end the pod, because as we've said before, you can't write it off until it's mathematically impossible. This is a stupid league. It creates stupid stories, and you can never fully say anything is done, but it's improbable now. I would say that Norwich City reached the top six rather than impossible. I think that defeat to Southampton felt, like it feels like a long way back, doesn't it, to do that? But to get in the top 10 from where they are, remarkable achievement, obviously. And I think it's important nobody loses sight of that. But equally, you look ahead to the final games of the season. There's some really exciting fixtures in there. They've got to go to Millwall away. They've got to go to Hull away on the final day. They've got to play Ipswich. They've got home games in there as well. It's going to be a really good test of whether they can sustain that form from 15 games to over 20, like you say, to 22 games. And if they can top it by the end of it, there's some real cause for excitement heading into next season, but also just that psychological factor of being able to go against some really good Championship teams and take results off them. Of course, they could have a say in that promotion race as well. So I suspect Philippe Clement wouldn't let anybody metaphorically enter the beach at this final stage of the season. But I still think that it has potential to be a really exciting end, even if there maybe isn't that much jeopardy in terms of what they can do, with the caveat that, look, I think Villa, when they won the playoffs, went on an insane run to get in there. Blackpool under Ian Holloway all those years ago did likewise. So you can't completely rule it out, but I think you've got to be realistic at the same time. But even so, I think it has the makings of quite an exciting end to the Championship campaign for the Canaries.
It does, yeah. I can't help but hark back to maybe some of the late goals they've conceded over the course of the season, and maybe the picture could have looked very different and probably more probable than what it does at the moment. But that doesn't sort of, again, mitigate any sort of negativity really towards the position they're in. To go from 23rd in the Championship to 10th, and just the comfortable nature that they managed to do that, where they have managed to get so many wins, so many clean sheets, and the performance levels have been so consistent over the piece, is remarkable, really. And I think there is an opportunity now. There's 7 games left, and probably one slightly bigger than the other 6. But for all the reasons that you outlined there, I don't think Clement will let the standards drop, and he will be targeting as many points as they can possibly pick up from all those games. Because, on the flip side, if they managed to go on a bad run in the last 7 games, and maybe they only won 1 or 2 of them, and sort of the force levels dropped a bit, all that sort of positivity would maybe take a little bit of a dent. Not hugely. I think fans would still be optimistic for the upcoming season, but it probably wouldn't bleed into the summer with quite the same level of optimism if they managed to now go and yeah, sort of continue the upward trajectory that they're on at the moment, and they managed to get some really big wins, and they sort of managed to dent the hopes of certain teams in and around the promotion mix who have been obviously consistent over the piece, because that's why they're in and around the top six, and that's where Norwich are aspiring to get to. And if they can go to a difficult den where the atmosphere is going to be loud and it's going to be on top of you, because that's what the den is, and they can go there and get a result, then I think that just adds further fuel to the positivity for the summer of what this group could potentially achieve. And I think they've got some winnable home games against sides that will be more on the beach. I think they've got Swansea, Derby, I know, are sort of in and around the top six, pushed still slightly at the moment, but there's a few opportunities there. Portsmouth obviously are scrapping at the other end of the table as well, so they've got completely different kind of challenges. Some sides will be, again, more physical. Some sides will be coming to try and play football with the ball on the pitch. And it does offer Clement more opportunity to sort of, get more of an understanding of the championship than he's already got. He seems to have nailed it already. But I think he'll just keep taking more lessons between now and the end of the season. Again, more opportunities to make decisions maybe on players and their futures at the football club, whether they fit what he wants to do sort of for next season and beyond. So I just think it's a good window now to, almost not free hit, but if they manage to continue their upward trajectory and they do get close to the top six, and we're sat here on the final day and Norwich are in it or around it, then I still don't think anybody's going to be surprised, really, given the way that they're performing at the moment. But it does feel like a little bit of a too big a bridge to gap. But that doesn't, for me, deflect any negativity on the job that he's done, which is astonishing.
Agreed. That seems like a nice place to leave it. Adam, thank you very much. Thank you all very much for watching and for listening this latest PinkUn podcast. And we can only leave you with one message, really. Make sure if there's a handshake to be given this week, you get there on time. Thanks for watching. See you soon.